Hi everyone, welcome back to English 221. This is for our class for Monday, the 30th of January. And last class, our first class, I reviewed the syllabus and the course outline. And of course, if you've got any questions or concerns, please let me know. And I also asked you to briefly introduce yourself. It was very nice to see lots of familiar names from previous classes. And today, what I wanted to do was to introduce the idea of Shakespearean biography. You remember that I had indicated that we are not going to have any assigned readings for the beginning of the semester, but what you should be doing is reading Shakespeare's sonnets, which is going to be the first readings that we will be discussing in class, and also moving into A Midsummer Night's Dream. And my hope is that by the time those elements are due on our course syllabus that you would have read them in their entirety, even though we've got multiple classes devoted to them. And I wanted you to get a sense a little bit of who Shakespeare is and some of the controversy associated with his writing the plays. But if you'll remember, I had talked about the syllabus but did not have a chance to talk about plagiarism, which I wanted to do today. And I'm sure that you've probably heard about plagiarism in other classes, using somebody else's language or ideas without acknowledging the source. And that's the trick, that you're acknowledging the source, because when you don't acknowledge the source, then the assumption is that you are the creator. And if that's not the case, well, then that's considered to be a kind of theft, intellectual theft, as opposed to the theft of property. And I always tell two stories to try to encourage my students not to plagiarize. So if you're a former student, you've heard both of them. The first happened to me early in my career, pre-internet, so I wasn't able to refer to many of the sources that exist to help teachers determine if students are plagiarizing. One of my favorites being Turnitin.com, where I can type in a sentence or a paragraph and do an electronic search. But at any rate, it didn't take me long to figure out that where I had seen this work before was from our own textbook, which I had assigned for the class, as if I wouldn't notice. And I don't know if the person was just a sloppy plagiarist, or perhaps the person was hoping that if there were some mechanical errors embedded within the text that I wouldn't become suspicious. But nevertheless, it was pretty clear to me where the original source was. But that's not the better story. The better story did not happen to me, but it happened around the same time period, pre-internet. It appeared in all the academic newspapers, which goes to show that, yes, there are indeed academic newspapers. And it happened to a middle-aged professor. That piece is important. This middle-aged professor is reading papers and, again, recognizes something. Not that surprising. We're pretty well read. And as he's contemplating, where have I read this before? Where have I read this before? It occurs to him he hadn't read this before. He had written it decades earlier when he was an undergraduate student himself in college. It was one of his old papers. I know the chances, 1 in a million, I suppose. But nevertheless, not only was this student unfortunate enough to be caught plagiarizing, but the student actually was unfortunate enough to hand in his own professor's work. And then, of course, there began a media frenzy about the story. So those are always my two stories, and that usually is the end. However, if you are keeping up to date with some of the technological advances, then you know that in the last several weeks, artificial intelligence has exploded onto the scene. That means that there is also going to be an explosion of programs to help teachers determine if a work was written through artificial intelligence. So, what I suggest to you is that you avoid all of this. And I kind of liken plagiarism to cheating on your taxes, in that both are tempting, relatively easy to do, and you may get away with it. But if you don't get away with it, the consequences are significant. In terms of taxes, well, then the IRS is involved, and that's definitely not pleasant. In terms of education, if you were to receive the minimum sentence, so to speak, you would fail that assignment, but the maximum sentence, so to speak, would be expulsion from the college with a notation on your transcript indicating that you were expelled because of plagiarism. So I hope that by my asking you not to do outside research that discourages you, and I certainly hope that you understand that artificial intelligence is just that, artificial, and what we are aiming for in this classroom is the expansion of real intelligence. So, with that said, I wanted to talk a little bit about two videos that I would like you to watch to give you an overview of who Shakespeare was as the man and also some of the controversy associated with his authorship. The first is an A&E biography. It's approximately 45 minutes long or so, and it gives you a nice overview of who he was. And then the other is 5 minutes long, so it's quite short. And it talks a little bit about some of the theories involved that perhaps Shakespeare did not write his plays. So that should take you a total of about 50 minutes with the addition of watching this video, of course. And our class attendance question, as you know, there will always be an attendance question at the ending of each of our classes. And you can think of our classes as meeting on Monday and Wednesday at 8 a.m. because by Monday and Wednesday at 8 a.m., I would have the class video posted. If we were meeting in person, we would meet Monday, Wednesday, 8 a.m. And I've had several students tell me how relieved they are that we are not meeting in person at 8 o'clock in the morning. But regardless of how you feel about it, you've got 48 hours from either the Monday or Wednesday at 8 a.m. to post your response to the attendance question. And if you need additional time, please let me know and I'll be happy to grant you an extension. So our question, which you can see in the notes below, and I'll always be adding the notes below our video. These are the actual notes that I use when I make these videos. Do you think Shakespeare was the author of the works attributed to him? And why or why not? Do you think Shakespeare was the author of the works attributed to him? And why or why not? So I hope you're doing well. I'm doing well. And as you can see from this question, there is no right or wrong answer. I'm more interested in your reasoning than I am about the answer itself. And next class, we will continue talking about Shakespeare and his time period and the authorship question. Take care. Bye-bye.